My daughter-in-law had been involved in a terrible accident and had slipped into a coma. During one of my visits to the hospital, my grandson approached me quietly and whispered, "Grandma, Mom isn't really sick. She's just pretending." Confused, I softly said, "What? Don't say that." But he handed me his phone, and in that moment, my blood ran cold. I gripped my old motorcycle behind the bakery, my hands still sticky with the scent of flour and yeast. It had been a busier morning than usual at Ellie's confectionery, with customers coming and going non-stop. Every day, watching the warm bread and pastries neatly arranged on the racks, listening to the lively chatter and laughter, brought me a quiet joy. But all I truly wanted now was to get to Eli's school to see my beloved grandson. He was always eager to share what happened in class, his eyes shining like he wanted to show me the whole world. Just thinking of his smile made my exhaustion fade. Just as I was securing my helmet, ready to start the engine, my phone vibrated fiercely from my pocket, an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. I hesitated, a flash of suspicion passing through me, but finally I pulled the phone to my ear. The voice on the line was hurried and cold, sharp enough to cut through my thoughts like a blade. "Are you Mrs. Lincoln? Your daughter-in-law has just been involved in a serious car accident. We're rushing her to Piedmont General Hospital." A ringing noise filled my ears, as if silence had suddenly taken over the world. My hands wobbled. They almost dropped the bike. I froze, gripping the handlebars tightly, feeling as if my blood had stopped flowing. My heart pounded so loudly I couldn't hear anything else. Chandra, my daughter-in-law, whom I had loved like my own daughter, had been in a terrible crash. Those words echoed repeatedly, but I couldn't grasp their true meaning. All I knew was that I had to see her, find out what was happening. I hurriedly dialed Marcus's number, my son, but only heard the phone ringing, no answer. "He must already be at the hospital," I told myself, trying to stay composed, but inside a wildfire of fear consumed my thoughts. I wanted to head straight there, yet then I remembered Eli. The boy was still at school, waiting for me to pick him up. I couldn't abandon him, couldn't let him hear about his mother elsewhere. I had to stay strong for Eli, for Marcus, for the entire family. Heart pounding, I sped toward the school. The streets of Atlanta seemed more congested than ever, each car, every honking horn feeling like an arm blocking my way. Every second dragged painfully, like a knife wound. How is Chandra? Is she in pain? Is she awake? Images of the violent crash burst through my mind, forcing me to push them away. All I could do was pray, muttering the childhood prayers my mother had taught me, begging for a miracle. When I finally reached the school gate, I saw Eli waiting, clutching his superhero backpack. His face lit up with joy at the sight of me, eyes twinkling as if he was about to tell me something funny. But I couldn't wait. I couldn't let him finish. With a trembling voice, I told him, "Eli, get on the bike now. Your mom had an accident. We need to go to the hospital." His smile disappeared instantly, like a sun going behind clouds. Without asking questions, he climbed on silently, small hands gripping my waist tightly the entire ride. He said nothing, but I felt his fear in that tight embrace. I wanted desperately to turn back, to hug him, and to tell him everything would be all right. But even I didn't believe those words. The cold facade of Piedmont General Hospital loomed in front of us, unyielding. The white exterior, the overpowering scent of disinfectant, suffocated the air in my lungs. I led Eli by the hand along the sterile corridors, my steps hurried but heavy with dread. When we reached the emergency room, I saw Marcus standing there, stunned, as if he'd lost himself. His hair was unkempt. His previously immaculate white shirt was wrinkled, stained with dark blood. I knew that blood belonged to Chandra Marcus had carried her in. Seeing my son like that tore my soul apart. Marcus, my strong, proud boy, looked like a lost child. When he saw me, he ran to me, burying his face in my shoulder, sobbing like never before. "Mom," he choked out. "Chandra?" The doctor appeared, voice trembling. "Her condition is very critical," he said, voice low and serious. "She suffered a severe traumatic brain injury and remains in a coma. We've done everything we could, but whether she wakes up depends on her will." Those words struck me hard, deep, and numbing. A deep coma. Her will? I couldn't grasp it. Chandra, who used to be so lively, so radiant, now lay motionless between life and death. Marcus collapsed. If I hadn't held him, he would have fallen. His eyes, usually full of strength, were blank, as if his entire world had crumbled. Eli, frightened, clung to me in tears, his small voice shouting, "Mommy," as if afraid of being abandoned. I pulled him close, hugging him tightly, trying to shield him from the chaos. But how could I protect him when I was drowning in my own fear? We sat on cold plastic chairs in the hallway, the seconds stretching endlessly. The smell of disinfectant was suffocating. The dry voice of the intercom repeated in the background, each sound like a dagger piercing my heart. I looked at Marcus, then at Eli, then at the closed emergency room door. I wanted to scream, to pound on that door, to do anything to know how Chandra was. But I could only wait helplessly. Almost 3 hours crawled by, feeling like a century. Finally, the emergency room door opened. An older man with a stern face stepped out, introducing himself as Dr. Alan Thorne, the hospital director. His voice was calm, measured, as if every word carried weight. "Your wife has suffered a severe traumatic brain injury and is in a deep coma. We've done everything possible, but her awakening depends on her own will." The blow hit me like an arrow to the chest. Deep coma. Her will? Words that refused to sink in. Chandra, once full of energy and life, now lay motionless in that hospital bed. Marcus collapsed, as if the strength had left him entirely. If I hadn't steadied him, he might have fallen to the floor. His eyes looked vacant, shattered. Eli, trembling, squeezed himself into my arms. I hugged him tightly, tears streaming down my face, silent, unstoppable. I didn't want him to see me cry, but my grief overwhelmed me. I was powerless in this storm. A young nurse, wearing a badge that read, "Sarah," approached softly with a chart. In a gentle voice, she said, "The family may see her through the glass, but please, no noise." Nodding, I led Eli and Marcus to the thick glass window. Through it, I saw Chandra motionless, surrounded by tangled wires. Her face was pale and lifeless, her lips closed as if she'd drifted far away to a place none of us could reach. Marcus pressed his forehead against the glass, crying out desperately, "Open your eyes, my love, and look at me." His voice broke, echoing through the silent corridor. Nurses hurried to comfort him, but I knew nothing could ease his heartbreak in that moment. I stood there, clutching Eli, feeling every beat of his trembling small chest. I wanted to say something, to offer solace, but my throat was tight and no words came. That night, I nearly had to drag Eli home. He cried inconsolably, pleading to stay with his mother. But I couldn't leave him alone in that stifling hospital. I held him close, promising we would come back the next day, even though I had no idea what awaited us. Marcus insisted on remaining at her side, seated in a plastic chair, staring blankly at the room's door. I looked at my son, my heart breaking for him, but I knew I had to leave. Eli needed me. The bakery needed me. This family depended on my strength. In the days that followed, my small house seemed shrouded in a suffocating darkness. Each morning, waking felt like carrying a heavy rock on my chest, making each breath labored. I had lived 62 years, seen divorces and farewells, but never before had I felt so helpless. Chandra was still there at the hospital, immobile as a statue, while Marcus, my proud, strong son, had become a shadow of himself, turning Piedmont General into his second home. Every day, I watched him sitting silently by her room, his eyes red and vacant, searching for some sign of life. During the day, he remained rooted to that spot, staring at the emergency room door as if, somehow, her awakening depended on him just watching long enough. But when night fell, the longing for relief drove him to alcohol. More than once I'd find him alone on a hospital bench, clutching a bottle of bourbon, his gaze lost in the emptiness. Once I arrived early and found him passed out beside an empty bottle rolling on the floor. A young nurse, maybe Sarah, gently approached and whispered, "Mrs. Hayes, he really shouldn't drink so much. It's not good for him." I could only nod, suppressing a sigh, my heart choking with pain. I did everything I could waking before dawn, baking fresh bread the kind Marcus loved, and bringing it to the hospital, hoping that the familiar aroma might stir him. But he'd only nibble a little before leaving the rest untouched, his eyes fixed on room 412's door. "Mom, I'm not hungry," he'd murmur hoarsely, as if all emotion had drained from him. Watching him, I felt myself shattering inside. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to tell him to be strong for Eli, for himself, but I could only silently gather the plates and carry my heavy heart back home, knowing that now everything depended on me. I was no longer young. Every morning I woke up aching from head to toe, joints stiff, muscles exhausted, but I couldn't afford to stop. Ellie's sweet spot was our only source of income, and I had to keep it running. At 3 o'clock in the morning, while the city still slept, I was already kneading dough and lighting the oven. The smell of freshly baked bread used to fill me with joy, but now it only reminded me of the peaceful days we had lost. Throughout the day, I managed the shop, constantly glancing at the clock, rushing to pick up Eli, my little grandson. There were days when the crowd was so overwhelming I could barely breathe, yet I forced a smile at every customer, even though inside I was ready to collapse. Eli, once full of energy and innocence, had changed completely. He used to be the sunshine of our home, bright and full of stories. Now he was quiet, withdrawn. Every afternoon after school, I'd find him sitting alone on a corner of the playground, clutching his superhero backpack tightly, lost in thought. One day, his teacher took me aside, her voice tinged with concern. "Mrs. Carter, Eli has been very withdrawn lately. He doesn't play with the other children anymore. He just sits alone. Is everything okay at home?" I forced a smile, casually replying, "He's just tired. Nothing to worry about." But deep down, I knew Eli carried a wound too deep for his small heart to hold. I longed to hug him, to reassure him that everything would be fine. Yet, how could I promise that when I wasn't sure myself? Each afternoon, I took Eli to visit his mother at the hospital. It was a fragile routine, a fragile hope that Chandra might wake up someday. But the scene there remained unchanged. Marcus still sat there with his unruly beard, reeking of alcohol. I tried to distract Eli from noticing, but the boy was more perceptive than I expected. He silently took the drawings he'd made in class, pressed them against the cold glass of her room, and whispered softly, "Mommy, today I drew our family at the beach. It's you, Daddy, Grandma, and me. Wake up soon so we can go, okay?" His voice quivered, as if clutching a fading dream slipping through his fingers. I stood by him, heart heavy, listening in silence. Chandra lay motionless, unresponsive. The steady beeping of her monitors was a cruel reminder she was still alive, hanging by a fragile thread. Her face was pallid, lips sealed as if hiding a secret. My heart ached at the sight of her. How many times had I stood there, hoping for a miracle, waiting for her to open her eyes, smile, say it had all been a nightmare. Yet every time there was only silence, and each time a piece of me shattered. Just as I was about to lead Eli away to escape the oppressive silence, he tugged at my sleeve, leaning close to my ear with quiet urgency. "Grandma, I don't think Mommy is sick," he whispered fiercely. "She's faking it." The words hit me like a slap. I turned to meet his innocent, crystal-clear eyes, fighting to maintain composure. "Eli, don't be silly. Your mom is very sick. You know that," I said softly. But he didn't argue like he normally would. Instead, he lowered his head, trembling, and took out the old cell phone Marcus had given him to watch cartoons. "Look at this, Grandma," he murmured in a hushed voice. I watched as the screen flickered to life, revealing a grainy video of her room, number 412. No one else was there, just her, lying in bed, wires and tubes surrounding her. Then, suddenly, Chandra's eyes slowly fluttered open. She looked around cautiously, as if checking that no one was watching. She scratched her cheek casually, then sat up slightly. Taking a glass of water from the nightstand, she sipped quietly before lying back down, closing her eyes as if drifting into sleep again. My head spun. That wasn't a woman in a coma. That was a deception. I sank into the chair, hands trembling, nearly dropping the phone. Eli's trembling voice broke my concentration. "I've seen it a few times, Grandma. When no one's around, she opens her eyes and looks around. But when you or Daddy are here, she stays still. I recorded it so you could see." A cold shiver ran down my spine. Eli's innocent confession. The brief footage, like a lightning strike piercing the fog inside me, shattered everything I believed. Chandra, my daughter-in-law, whom I loved as if she were my own, was pretending. But why? For what reason? Hastily, I shoved the phone into my purse, trying to sound firm. "Eli, you absolutely must not tell your father about this. Do you understand?" The boy nodded, eyes wide with fear and confusion. He hardly understood what he'd seen, but he sensed the seriousness. I embraced him briefly, trying to hide the chaos roiling inside me, even as Marcus suddenly stirred. He opened tired eyes, rubbing his face before giving us a slurred, rough voice. "What are you two talking about?" I hesitated, my mind racing. I shook my head, changing the subject. "Nothing. I was just reminding Eli to do his homework." Marcus nodded slowly, then pulled his son close and whispered softly, "Don't worry, buddy. Mom will wake up soon." Eli lowered his gaze, avoiding his father's eyes, and I felt a knife twist in my chest. The boy was too young to bear this secret, too small to carry such a burden. On the drive home, I moved so stiffly, I felt I was floating above my body, disconnected from the world. The images from the video repeated relentlessly: Eli's frightened whisper, his terrified expression, Chandra's unresponsive face. Nothing quite fit together anymore. Was I misinterpreting what I saw? Was it merely involuntary muscle movement, a trick of the light? But deep inside, I knew the truth wasn't that simple. Chandra was hiding something, and that thought filled me with dread, not just for her, but for Marcus, for Eli, and for the fragile family we had once kept protected. The next morning, before dawn, I woke early, slipping out before the first light seeped through the crack in the door. I arrived at Piedmont General Hospital in the stillness of those early hours, the hallways silent and deserted, only a handful of staff quietly going about their routines. Marcus hadn't arrived yet. Maybe he had gone home to clean up after a long night beside his wife. The emptiness in the corridor felt almost oppressive, leaves of quiet waiting for the day to disturb it. I stood silently in the corner of the hallway, peering through the window into Chandra's room. She was still there, unmoving, her face pale and wax-like. But now, as I watched her, I no longer sensed the fragility of someone caught between life and death. Instead, I saw only a veil of mystery, hiding something I couldn't quite understand. Inside, Nurse Sarah, who had been exclusively assigned to care for my daughter-in-law, was tending to her with smooth, somewhat mechanical motions. I hid behind the wall, observing every gesture, every shift. Sarah was working diligently, yet her eyes constantly darted outward, as if afraid of being caught. Every so often, she whispered something too quiet for me to hear, but with an undertone that bred unease. Something wasn't right. I was certain of it. My heart twisted with a mix of anger and fear, yet I kept telling myself to stay calm. If I wanted to uncover the truth, I couldn't let my emotions control me. When Sarah finally stepped out of room 412 carrying the control chart, I took a deep breath and moved forward. She was bent over, writing, not noticing my approach. I steadied my voice, trying to suppress the pounding of my heart. "Good morning, Sarah. Tell me, when you're caring for Chandra, have you ever noticed anything unusual? For instance, her waking up secretly when no one's around?" I chose each word carefully, watching her reaction closely. She jolted as if I'd thrown a bomb at her chest. Her eyes widened with terror, and the pen she held slipped from her grip with a dry clatter that echoed down the silent corridor, sealing her fear with that sound. "Mrs. Hayes, what are you saying?" "I don't understand," she stammered, avoiding my gaze as if it were a flame. She took a step back, clutching the control chart as if it were her last shield. I moved closer, my tone firm, devoid of softness. "That reaction," I pressed, confirming that it was true, wasn't it? Her face paled further, lips trembling as if she might cry. She sank into a chair, voice trembling, barely above a whisper, saying, "I was just following Dr. Thorne's orders. He asked me to keep it a secret. Please, I'm just an employee. Don't involve me in this." That half-confession hit me like a lightning bolt. I stood frozen, feeling as if the ground had opened beneath me. It was real. Chandra hadn't merely faked the coma. Dr. Alan Thorne, the hospital director himself, was involved. I struggled to keep my anger in check, but inside I was boiling. "What exactly did he ask you? Be clear, Sarah," I demanded, taking another step closer, cutting off her escape route. She shook her head vigorously, hands wringing, words halting. "He just told me to take good care of Mrs. Ortega and not to tell anyone she had woken up. That's all. I have nothing to do with anything else. Please don't blame me." Her eyes shone with desperation, as if seeking forgiveness, but I couldn't give in. Not because I aimed to punish her, but because I desperately needed the truth to protect Marcus and Eli from whatever lies were spinning behind the hospital walls. Just then, a nurse passing by glanced our way, giving us a curious look. Sarah quickly stood, grabbing her pen and pretending to jot down notes as if nothing had happened. I silently turned away, my heart pounding loudly in my chest. Every step I took out of the hallway felt like I was dragging a weight of stone. What Sarah admitted confirmed my suspicions and revealed something even darker. This wasn't merely Chandra's deception. It was a conspiracy orchestrated by someone wielding real influence, Dr. Thorne included. What were they plotting? How could they be so cruel, deceiving an entire family, letting Marcus and Eli suffer in the dark? When Marcus arrived at the hospital, I tried to keep my composure, pretending everything was normal. He asked in a tired voice, "Mom, how is Chandra? Any news?" I just shook my head softly and replied, "She's the same. The doctor says there's been no progress." But inside, a fire was burning. I longed to tell Marcus everything, show him Eli's video, reveal that his wife wasn't in a coma. Yet, seeing how exhausted and red-eyed he was, I held back. I knew that truth might be the final blow he couldn't survive. That night, I lay awake in my old bed, moonlight seeping faintly through the curtains, illuminating the ceiling but unable to dispel the darkness clouding my mind. I gripped the blankets tightly, fighting sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, piercing questions cut into me. Why had Chandra done this? What part had Dr. Thorne played? Had all those years of love and trust been just a facade? I felt betrayed not only by my daughter-in-law, but by my own naivety. It became clear that I couldn't unravel this mystery alone. I needed help. At dawn, I woke early and took Eli to school as usual. The boy kept his silence, clutching his Spider-Man backpack, his glance vacant and lost like he was trapped somewhere he didn't understand. I stroked his hair and forced a smile. "Try your best at school today. I'll pick you up early." Eli nodded but hardly believed my words. Watching his small figure vanish behind the school gates, I felt my chest tighten. I had to find the truth not only for myself, but for Eli, so he wouldn't keep living in this shadow. I drove straight to Detective Davis's office, an old friend of my late husband, a former police officer whose dedication and sharp mind I always trusted. His office was tucked into a rickety corner building, its faded wooden sign creaking in the wind. When I entered, I found him behind a battered desk, his piercing eyes peering over silver-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Hayes, it's been a long time. What's going on? You look stressed," he said seriously, leaning forward. I took a deep breath and recounted everything from Eli's hesitant whisper and the shocking video to the confrontation with Sarah. My hands trembled as I showed him the footage on my phone. He studied it, frowning, fingers tapping a rhythmic pattern on the desk. "This is serious, Mrs. Hayes," he finally said quietly. "If what you're describing is accurate, a conspiracy is in motion. I'll help, but you have to keep this under wraps, especially from your son." I nodded, feeling relief and weight at once as the truth's shadow grew heavier. Davis promised to begin monitoring the hospital immediately, and I left his office with a fragile spark of hope mingled with dread. That night, I returned to the hospital with Eli. The atmosphere inside was just as oppressive as before. The sterile smell hit me hard, and the constant hum of machines filled the silence surrounding Chandra's room. Marcus was already there, sitting quietly beside her, holding her hand, tears streaming down his face. A sight that tore at my heart. My strong son, the pride of my world, looked hollowed out, almost vacant. I longed to embrace him, to tell him everything. But each time I looked into his bloodshot eyes, I hesitated. How could I reveal that the woman he loved might be deceiving him? How could I break him further? I slipped away under the guise of fetching water, leaving Eli next to his father. Near the nurse's station, I caught sight of Sarah conferring with a security guard. She slipped a thin folder into his hand, her nervous gaze darting around, as if fearing to be caught. I held my breath and slowed to listen. "Get this to him quickly," she whispered urgently. The guard nodded, pocketed the folder, and hurried toward Dr. Thorne's office. As Sarah turned away, our eyes met briefly. She froze, then quickly lowered her gaze and hurried off, acting as if she hadn't seen me. I moved forward, considering calling out to her, but the guard's wary glance stopped me cold. An invisible, tightening grip seemed to clutch my throat. A few days later, Davis invited me to a secluded coffee shop tucked away in a deserted alley. When I arrived, he was already seated in a shadowed corner, a stack of photographs laid out before him. "Sit down," he said quietly. He pushed the images toward me, and as I looked, my whole body went numb. The photos revealed Chandra, dressed in a hospital gown beneath a white coat, sneaking out of her room under cover of night. She moved quietly but purposefully, heading straight for Dr. Thorne's office. The door shut quickly behind her, lights still glowing inside long after midnight. Hands trembling, I looked at the pictures, feeling my blood drain away. This, this is real," I whispered, voice breaking. Davis nodded solemnly. His office, I knew, was soundproofed, so I couldn't hear anything, but the scene was clear. Something strange was happening. I'd watched her nights after night, and this wasn't an isolated incident. He was already investigating further. This could be bigger than I'd feared. I nodded slowly, though my mind was spinning. Sarah's words echoed painfully. "I only follow Thorne's orders." The pieces were falling into place, revealing a terrifying, unthinkable truth I desperately didn't want to accept. Back home, I sat alone in the darkened kitchen, the faint glow of the moon illuminating my trembling hands. Eli was already asleep, but I knew the fear still haunted him. He'd carry it forever, I suspected. Marcus, too, remained at the hospital, caring for a wife who might be deceiving him. I reached for my phone, replaying Eli's quiet video, then looked once more at Davis's shocking photos. Each detail pierced me, yet I knew I couldn't stop. I had to trust Davis and find more proof myself, no matter what it took. I couldn't bear the thought of my family living under a lie any longer. I had to protect Marcus, shield Eli, even if it meant breaking my own heart in the process. That morning, I woke before dawn, unable to sleep, not from exhaustion, but from the gnawing doubts and pain that had consumed me all night. Glancing at the clock, I saw it was barely 4 o'clock. Marcus, my son, was surely still deep in sleep after a night of drinking. It was my chance to do what I had postponed for too long. Silently, I climbed the stairs barefoot to avoid making any noise, the house eerily silent except for the steady ticking of the wall clock. Standing before Marcus and Chandra's bedroom door, I gripped the doorknob tightly, my heart pounding fiercely. I knew I shouldn't do this, that I shouldn't invade my son and daughter-in-law's privacy. But I had no other choice. If Chandra truly was betraying us, I needed proof, something to protect the family. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The room was still filled with Chandra's sweet, penetrating perfume, a scent that once felt tender and familiar. On the dresser, a red lipstick lay open as if she had just left it. Small details like that sliced through my soul. I recalled her early days after marriage, how carefully she styled her hair, the bright smile when trying on new dresses. Had it all been an illusion? Shaking away those memories, I began my search. I opened every drawer cautiously, trying not to disturb anything. Every tiny sound-rustling fabric, the creak of a drawer made me jump, afraid Marcus might wake and catch me. I checked the dresser, the bookshelves, even beneath the bed, but found only the usual objects. Finally, I opened the old closet where Chandra kept her belongings and discovered a hidden drawer at the bottom, concealed beneath layers of silk scarves. Inside, wrapped in a rubber band, were 2 blue folders. My hands trembled as I opened them, as if unleashing some horrifying secret. Within were 2 insurance policies, carefully printed documents bearing Chandra's signature. The first was a health insurance policy, with a clause that would pay a substantial sum should the insured require long-term treatment or fall into a coma. The amount stunned me, enough to buy a large house outright. The second was even more terrifying, a temporary life insurance policy, with a payout several times higher, capable of completely transforming someone's life. I read and reread the policies, trying to understand how Chandra, a woman with no stable job, could have signed such large contracts. She used to ask Marcus for money for groceries, sometimes even shyly asking me to cover basic expenses. So where had she gotten the funds to pay for these policies? And why? Fumbling, I snapped photos of each page with my phone, cautious not to crease the documents. Each click felt like a betrayal, but I knew I had no choice. I quietly replaced the folders, closed the drawer, and left the room. As I finally opened the door, I collided almost face to face with Marcus. His eyes were riddled with suspicion, his hair was disheveled, and his voice hoarse. "Mom, what are you doing in my room?" I quickly hid my phone behind my back, heart pounding again. "I was just looking for the old photo album," I offered with a forced smile. He sighed, said nothing more, and staggered toward the kitchen, where I knew he'd likely search for the bottle of liquor again. Watching his retreating figure, my chest tightened. I longed to tell him everything, to show him the documents, reveal the truth, but I knew he wasn't ready. Later that afternoon, I met Davis at our usual corner coffee shop. He had fresh information. As I sat down, he pushed a thick stack of photos toward me, taken in the hospital's empty parking lot. The images revealed Chandra and Dr. Thorne inside a car, sharing intimate gestures that left no room for ambiguity. Chandra, dressed in patient's clothes, was smiling at Thorne, her hand resting on his. Her gaze was full of intent. Frozen, I stared at the cold coffee stirring in front of me, trembling hands betraying me. "This is real, Davis," I whispered, voice breaking. He nodded solemnly. "I've been watching them for several nights. It's not the first time. There's something very suspicious here, Mrs. Hayes. You need to prepare yourself. This may be bigger than anything we imagined." I stared at the photos, feeling as if the ground were shifting beneath me. Chandra wasn't just faking her coma. She was involved in a clandestine relationship with Thorne, and they weren't working alone. It was a conspiracy, a perfect deception designed to fool my entire family. That midday, the Atlanta heat was overwhelming, the air inside my tiny bakery dense and suffocating. I had just finished cleaning the counter, wiping sweat from my brow, trying to focus on organizing the shop to distract myself from the storm inside. As I arranged the remaining bread in a basket, ready to close up and take a break, thunderous knocks jolted the alley door. The noise was deafening, nearly knocking the tray from my hands. Heart pounding, I hurried to open it, my instincts warning me something was terribly wrong. The moment the door swung open, I froze. 3 men stood there, faces hard, tattoos of snakes and dragons crawling down their arms like scars of some unwritten war. The tallest, with a shaved head and commanding presence, held out a crumpled paper and spoke in a rough voice. "Where is Chandra? It's time to settle the debt." My eyes darted to the paper. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, blood rushing out of my limbs. I tried to keep my composure, though my hands trembled uncontrollably. "You're mistaken. My daughter-in-law is in a coma at the hospital. She can't see anyone." The man let out a cruel, dry chuckle. "Coma? You think we're fools? Chandra asked us for a hefty sum to fund some business venture. If she plays smart, she can keep her family safe. But if she doesn't..." His words sliced through me like a blade. I looked around, eyes meeting neighbors peeking from their doorways, their expressions a blend of curiosity and fear. I understood then. If this escalated, whispers would spread, and my family's reputation would be shattered. Clenching my fists, I forced out a steady voice. "Please, calm down. I don't know anything about these debts. Let me find out." But the leader wasn't swayed. He signaled toward my modest house. "Find out. You have 1 week. If there's no money, sell the house and pay us." A cold wave washed over me. I wanted to scream, to protest, tell them Chandra was still in the hospital, that I had nothing to do with this. But their icy stares made it clear they weren't leaving empty-handed. Rushing inside, I unlocked the hidden safe in the kitchen, grabbing the savings I'd carefully stashed away over years for Eli and the bakery. My trembling hands handed the money to the man. "Take this for now. Please, give me more time." The men looked at me with contempt, as if deciding whether to crush me right then and there. Eventually, the leader pocketed the cash and issued a final threat. "1 week, don't make us come back." Then they turned and disappeared down the alley, their footsteps echoing ominously. I sank to the steps, drenched in sweat, not from the oppressive heat, but from fear and helplessness that clawed at my insides. Chandra and her debts, her investments, those words haunted me, yet they made no sense. How could she, whom I'd always thought so simple, be involved in something so dangerous? My phone vibrated in my pocket. Heart pounding, I retrieved it and opened the message from Davis. My breath caught as I saw the photos he'd sent Chandra and Dr. Thorne in a parked car at the hospital, shamelessly embracing. Chandra's eyes looked at him with tenderness that seemed to erase the entire universe. Along with the images was a short audio clip, along with a note from Davis. "I recorded their conversation inside the car. You should listen." I hesitated, then pressed play. My trembling hand almost dropped the phone. Chandra's voice was rough but unmistakable. "Let me sleep a few more weeks, and then we'll take the final steps. That insurance money will clear all our debts and give us a fresh start." Thorne's voice was calm, precise. "Relax, Chandra. Everything's going smoothly. As long as no one suspects, we'll succeed." The truth slammed into me with brutal force. Chandra wasn't just pretending to be in a coma. She wasn't simply having an affair with Thorne. She'd staged the entire charade to escape her debts, cash out the insurance, and leave everything behind, Marcus, Eli, and me, to start anew with her partner. That evening, I sat in front of a cold cup of coffee, clutching it as if it could still hold some of my courage. I knew that if I wanted to save my family, silence was no longer an option. Marcus had to know the truth, even if it shattered him completely. Taking a deep breath, I stood up and walked into the living room, where my son sat staring into space. I laid all the evidence on the table, the photos of Chandra and Thorne, the insurance documents, and the recording on my phone. Marcus looked up, clouded eyes blank, not understanding what I was doing. "Mom, what is all this?" he asked, voice rough, still heavy with last night's drunkenness. Sitting across from him, I tried to steady myself despite the pounding of my heart. "Marcus, I need you to see this. I know you probably don't want to believe it, but the truth must be faced." I pointed to the pile of photographs, my voice cracking with emotion. "Chandra isn't in a coma. She's deceiving us." Marcus shook his head vehemently, trembling as he reached out to touch the photos, and suddenly, in a fit of rage, he hurled them to the floor and shouted, "It can't be! Where did you get this? It's all manipulated. Chandra would never betray me." His red-rimmed eyes seemed desperate, clinging to a shred of faith that was slipping away. Gently, I grasped his trembling hand and spoke as softly as I could. "Marcus, you need to wake up. Face the reality. Chandra didn't just lie to you. She also manipulated Eli's innocence. It's going to hurt, but you can't keep living in denial. Play the recording." The sound of Chandra's voice filled the room again, cold and clear. "Let me rest for a few more weeks, then we'll take the final step. That insurance payout will settle all our debts and give us a fresh start." Marcus froze as if slapped. He listened to the entire recording in silence, then suddenly broke down into tears. Tears of anguish and collapse. Why, Mom? Why did she do this to me? Why to Eli? He whispered, voice fractured. I embraced him, feeling his body shake uncontrollably in my arms, helpless to find comfort. All I could manage was, I'm so sorry, Marcus. I hurt too, but we have to be strong for Eli. Marcus stood unsteadily, stumbled toward the liquor cabinet, poured himself a glass of bourbon, and gulped it down in one shot. Then he staggered into his room and slammed the door shut, the noise echoing like a hammer blow to my chest. I knew my son needed time, but I also understood I couldn't wait any longer. The naked truth was out, and if Chandra and Thorne were about to finalize their plan, I had to act before it was too late. The following morning, I arranged to meet Davis in a quiet corner of our usual coffee shop. He was there with a black coffee, his face tense with worry. Did you tell Marcus yet? He asked as soon as I sat down. I nodded gravely. He doesn't want to believe it, but a mother can't keep her son under false illusion. What do we do now, Davis? He gently tapped his fingertips on the table, his gaze sharp. We have enough evidence, the recording, the photos, the insurance contract. But if you want Marcus to see the truth with his own eyes, we need one last move at the hospital. We have to make Chandra and Thorne reveal themselves. I nodded, feeling a mixture of determination and dread. I knew Marcus had to see it firsthand, or he would forever live in the illusion of the woman he once loved. The next day, I sought out Captain Lisa Coleman, a dear friend from college who was now chief of police in the area. We shared our youth, and I trusted her implicitly. In her small office, I laid out everything, from Eli's video to Davis's evidence. She listened carefully, her face growing more serious with each revelation. When I showed her the recording, she shook her head solemnly. This is an organized scam. If what you say is true, Chandra and Thorne have broken not only ethics, but the law. She hesitated before looking at me intently. I'll help you, but we need a solid pretext to enter without raising suspicion. Do you have a plan? I barely had time to answer when my phone vibrated from my purse. It was Thorne's number. I answered, heart pounding, as his voice, layered with false concern, spoke. Mrs. Hayes, I regret to inform you that Chandra's condition is worsening. Perhaps the family should prepare for tomorrow morning. Please be present. We will deliver the final prognosis. A cold wave washed over me, like touching ice. It was exactly the moment they intended to end their charade. I managed to sound calm as I replied, Yes, doctor. We'll be there tomorrow. Once I hung up, I turned back to Coleman, voice trembling. Tomorrow, in Chandra's room. That's the moment. She nodded firmly. All right, I'll assemble the team. We'll act at the exact right time. Hope flickered inside me, yet fear grew stronger. What would happen when Marcus confronted the truth? How would he handle the blow? And Eli, my beloved grandson, what would he do if he learned his mother had betrayed this family? That night, I took Eli to Mrs. Peterson's house, a trusted neighbor across the street. I didn't want him to witness the terrible scene about to unfold. When I told him he would stay there that night, worry crept into his eyes. Grandma, my mom is fine. You're taking me to see her tomorrow, right? I hugged him tightly, fighting back tears. That's right, sweetheart. I'll pick you up early. As he turned away, my heart shattered. How could I protect him from such a cruel revelation? Returning home, I found Marcus in the dark, a bottle of liquor at his feet. He said nothing, just sat there, eyes red and empty. I approached, placing a hand on his shoulder, and softly told him, You need to go to the hospital tomorrow. You have to see the final truth. He looked up at me, face etched with pain, then nodded silently. I knew deep down that everything was about to change forever. The morning was heavy with foreboding. I woke early, not from the routine of baking bread, but from the gnawing unease inside me. Today was the day the truth would surface, and though I was prepared, my trembling heart betrayed me. Marcus sat at the table, exhausted from days lost to alcohol and sorrow. I looked at my son, longing to say something comforting, but my throat clenched. "Let's go," I managed to rasp. He nodded, stood, and we drove in silence toward Piedmont General Hospital. During the ride, Marcus gazed out the window, detached, as though his spirit had already left his body. At the hospital, the familiar scent of disinfectant and the hum of machines greeted us. Sarah, a nurse I knew well, was nervously present, as if sensing that something was about to happen. I caught her eye but said nothing, only squeezed Marcus's hand to give him strength. Dr. Thorne emerged from his office, holding a file, and greeted us with a faint formal nod. "Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Hayes, please come in." My stomach clenched with rage, knowing the police team was just outside ready to act. We entered Chandra's room, already filled with relatives. The air rippled with tension. Chandra lay motionless, her face pale, but I no longer saw her as a victim. I saw only a woman who had staged a cruel puppet show, deceiving my entire family. Thorne started his speech, voice sorrowful. "After many days of effort, we regret to inform you that her condition is worsening. She may not survive much longer. The family needs to prepare." Marcus bowed his head, shoulders trembling. Some relatives began to weep, the sobs spreading across the room. It was a stage-managed scene of mourning calculated, fake, and devastating. I stood there, fists clenched, fighting the raging fury inside. I watched Thorne's perfect performance, knowing it wouldn't last long. Just as he reached for his pen to sign the hospice report, the door burst open. 3 police officers entered, led by Captain Coleman, her face cold and unwavering. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. "Dr. Thorne, Miss Chandra Ortega, you are under arrest for insurance fraud and conspiracy," Coleman announced firmly, her voice thunderous. It was a blow that shattered the entire charade. Then, incredibly, Chandra, still supposed to be in a coma, suddenly opened her eyes, sat upright with a scream. "What are you talking about? You have no proof. This is slander." Her shrill cry shattered the false illusion, revealing the woman who had been motionless for weeks was anything but innocent. Marcus stood frozen, mouth agape, watching his wife scream wildly. Chandra turned toward him, panic in her eyes, as if realizing she'd just given herself away. She quickly averted her gaze. Coleman signaled, and an officer stepped forward, presenting all the evidence. The photos of her and Thorne in the car, the recording of their conversation, the insurance documents, and the nurse's statement. I pulled out my phone and showed the video Eli had recorded. Chandra secretly opening her eyes, drinking water, sitting up when no one was looking. Murmurs rippled through the room, accounts of shock and betrayal. One relative whispered in disbelief, "How is this possible?" Another cried, "She fooled the entire family." The atmosphere spiraled into chaos. The illusion shattered. Marcus trembled, eyes fixed on Chandra. Then, as if waking from a nightmare, he shouted, voice thick with grief, "Chandra, why? Why did you do this to me? To Eli?" Chandra lunged at him, desperate, crying, trying to hug him, plead, "Marcus, you have to understand. I had no choice. I owed too much. I just wanted us to have a better life." But Marcus pushed her away, eyes blazing with rage and disgust. "A better life? You abandoned our son. You abandoned this family for money." He spat bitterly, every word stabbing like a dagger into his own chest. Thorne remained silent, witnessing the unraveling of his deception. With his head bowed, He could offer no more excuses as the recording from the car echoed through the silence. His voice was cold and precise, each word carefully measured. "Relax, Dr. Harper. As long as no one suspects, we will succeed." The entire room fell into tense silence. Only the distant hum of the hospital intercom broke the quiet. At a signal from Coleman, the officers stepped forward and placed cold silver handcuffs on both of their wrists. Chandra continued to struggle, her screams desperate and raw. "I did everything because of the debts. I had no way out." But no one believed her anymore, not even the relatives who, moments earlier, had been crying for her. Now their gazes held something strange and distant. Marcus sank into a chair, his hands over his face, seemingly unable to bear the weight of the truth. I approached him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder and softly whispering, "This is the truth, son. I know it hurts, but we have to keep going." Marcus remained silent, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. I felt his pain as if it were my own. I had lost a daughter-in-law I loved dearly, yet Marcus had lost a fragment of his life entirely. The hospital room, once quiet, now thrummed with chaos. Chandra's screams grew faint and distant as she was led away in handcuffs. Thorne walked behind her, his head bowed low, stripped of the authority that once defined him as a hospital director. When the door finally closed, restoring silence, I surveyed the stunned faces of the relatives and felt an overwhelming emptiness settle in my heart. The truth had emerged, but it brought no relief, only pain and hollow ache. Months had passed since that day of revelation in the hospital, yet every detail remained vivid in my memory. Chandra sitting up and screaming frantically, Marcus's eyes filled with anguish, the metallic click of the handcuffs sealing their fate. It all seemed like an unending nightmare. But now, in the courtroom, I sensed a faint weight lifting from my chest, a tentative relief. Today marked the public trial of Chandra and Dr. Thorne, and I knew it would be the final punctuation in the cruel saga that had shattered my family. Marcus and I sat in the front row of the packed courtroom. The oppressive atmosphere buzzed with murmurs from strangers, reporters, and a few neighbors. Marcus sat beside me, much thinner than before, yet devoid of the desperation that once haunted his eyes, no longer clutching bottles in despair. Instead, calm had settled over him, as if he had learned to endure the pain. I clasped his hand tightly, offering silent support. He looked at me with a fragile smile, and I understood, though it still hurt, he was quietly trying to move on. The judge, a stern middle-aged man, began reading the charges. His voice rang out clearly, each word like a hammer striking steel, shattering the illusions of the past few months. Chandra and Thorne faced multiple counts: fraud, insurance scams, conspiracy to steal assets. All evidence was displayed on the large screen: Eli's video, Davis's photographs, the car recording, and the insurance policies I had discovered in a drawer. Each piece revealed the intricate scheme devised by the two to deceive my entire family. Thorne sat in the defendant box, head bowed, daring not to meet anyone's gaze. With a deep, almost whispered voice, he admitted his guilt, confessing that his involvement stemmed from ambition and his relationship with Chandra. She, however, still fought back tears, her tangled hair and reddened eyes flickering toward Marcus. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I never wanted it to be like this. I just wanted to pay off our debts, to give us a better life." But her tears, long delayed, now failed to move anyone. Marcus looked at her with ice in his eyes, utterly devoid of compassion. "You betrayed this family. You betrayed Eli just for money," he said, his voice trembling with rage and sorrow. The final judgment was read. Thorne is sentenced to 6 years in prison, Chandra to 5. They are also ordered to compensate for all damages. As the judge's gavel struck, the sharp, dry sound sealed the verdict, bringing everything to an end. Chandra collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably, yet no one in the room wished to meet her gaze. Thorne was led out, head still bowed, once powerful, now reduced to shadows. Marcus stood beside me, hands clasped, tears falling silently. I knew those tears weren't of anguish, but of liberation. My son was finally free from the illusion of the woman he had loved. When we exited the courthouse, the familiar Atlanta sun no longer burned with the same intensity. Reporters swarmed us, microphones thrust forward, questions pouring out. I responded with one calm, resolute phrase: "Justice has been served." Never underestimate the power of a family's feelings. The price can be too high. Marcus stayed silent but squeezed my hand, silently signaling that he was ready to move forward. Life gradually resumed its rhythm, though the scars remained. My cozy bakery, Ellie's Sweet Spot, reopened its doors, bustling with customers. The comforting aroma of flour and yeast rekindled that sense of home. Every morning, I woke early, kneaded the dough, baked fresh bread, and felt my heart lighten. Eli began chattering again, helping me in the shop, darting around with his innocent smile. He still mentioned his mother, but not with the sadness that once haunted him. The sound of his laughter, like warm sunlight, filling the aching gaps in our small house. Marcus also changed. He found a new job at a mechanic shop, where he could focus on tangible tasks instead of drowning his sorrows in alcohol. I watched him learn to be a true father, spending time playing with Eli, helping him with homework, reading stories at night. Some nights, I saw Marcus sitting alone by the window, lost in thought. But I knew he was learning to forgive not Chandra, perhaps, but himself. One afternoon, gathered around the table, Eli looked up suddenly, eyes wide, and turned to me. "Grandma, will Mom come back someday?" The boy's innocent question pierced like a dagger, yet I managed a gentle smile. I took his tiny hand and softly answered, "Some people choose to leave, Eli, but what matters most is that we still have each other, your dad, you, and me. That's what family is." Marcus looked at us, his eyes filled with quiet resolve, then gently stroked Eli's hair. "That's right, son. We'll always be here for each other." Eli nodded, a small, trusting smile spreading across his face. For the first time in many months, I felt warmth flood back into our home, just as it used to be. I stayed there, watching my son and grandson, my heart calm. The storm had passed, leaving scars, yes, but also giving us the strength to move on. I reflected on the nights of suffering, the sleepless hours, the moments of despair when I thought I couldn't go on. Yet now I realize that my family endured and, more than that, grew stronger and closer. I rose, poured another glass of orange juice for Eli, and listened as he excitedly described his latest drawing scenes of us under a bright sun, united and happy. Seeing Eli's bright smile, Marcus's steady gaze, I knew that no matter how dark the past had been, we would face the future together. Our house, once shattered by the storm, was now rebuilt not with bricks, but with love and trust. And I, who had spent my life shielding this family, finally found peace in my soul. The story you've just heard has been changed in names and places to protect those involved. We share it not to judge, but in hopes that someone listening might pause and reflect. How many mothers suffer silently within their homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you find the courage to confront everything and reclaim your voice? I want to hear your opinion because every story could become a candle, lighting the way for others. God's blessings are eternal, and I am confident that courage will guide us toward a brighter future.